Imagine a corporation responsible for managing $10 trillion. No, we didn't make a mistake with the number. $10 trillion. It's hard to even imagine the scale of that amount, but we'll help you. $10 trillion is about 40% of the world's largest economy, the US GDP, or half of the world's second largest economy, the GDP of the European Union. To make it even clearer, with that money, you could buy 40% of all goods and services produced in the US last year, or half of everything produced in Europe. Moreover, indirectly, this corporation controls about the same amount, which in a certain sense makes it equal to the world's leading economic superpowers. Although it is quite public, its shares are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Every year, it publishes reports on its activities. A glass skyscraper bearing its logo adorns Manhattan. Meet BlackRock, a major shareholder of Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and literally almost every other company whose name you can recall. How did BlackRock become the world's leading investment giant in just a couple of decades? And what is its secret weapon that has ensured such incredible success? My name is Ilya Solovi, and that's what we're talking about today. To use the dry, official language of Wall Street, BlackRock is the largest asset management company in the world. What does that mean? Imagine that you have a certain amount of spare money, and it's quite a large sum. For example, you sold an apartment. You could put that money under your mattress and just let it sit there. You could take it to the bank, and then the amount will gradually start to grow. You could become a stock market player or invest in crypto with all the risks that come with it. But if you don't want to take such risks, yet still want your money to work for you, you can give it to professionals by putting it into some investment fund. Its managers, relying on their experience and knowledge, will start growing your capital by independently investing it in a variety of stocks. So, BlackRock is a company that brings together dozens or even hundreds of all kinds of investment funds. Each of them has its own area of specialization. $10 trillion is the total amount that the firm currently manages. The money of individual investors, for example, from the sale of an apartment, is naturally almost invisible in it. The lion's share of this enormous capital consists of investments from large organizations, but indirectly, this is also the money of ordinary people who may not even be aware of BlackRock's existence. How does this work? For example, you are a teacher. You go to work every single day, receive your salary once a month, and find yourself thinking about how you can't wait to retire. Meanwhile, your pension contributions are collected in a special fund. This fund accumulates a large sum, since there are many teachers like you. Naturally, the fund managers are interested in making sure that this money doesn't just sit in the account, but generates dividends that at least compensate for inflation. The fund managers go to an investment company such as BlackRock and give them their billion or 10 billion or even 100 billion. And there are many such organizations with free capital. Pension funds, charitable organizations, insurance companies, universities, sovereign wealth funds from rich oil countries. They are BlackRock's main clients. There are many investment companies similar to BlackRock. It's just the largest one. Why do many financiers, especially those from the banking sector, dislike them? It's a parallel shadow world where colossal amounts of money circulate. The banking market is usually well controlled by regulators and operates under strict rules. The investment market is much more free. At the same time, the companies operating in it often use disguised banking instruments without much external oversight. BlackRock has the reputation of being the largest shadow bank on the planet. What is most frustrating for banks? When they go under, BlackRock thrives. In other words, financial crises and other crises have literally become a fertile ground for this company, thanks to which it has become even richer and more powerful. How is this even possible? In 2008, the bubble in the American real estate market burst spectacularly. It buried under its rubble quite a few banks that had become too carried away with investments in mortgage-backed securities. Pillars of the market that once seemed eternal went bankrupt or were sold for a pittance. Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, the largest US mortgage agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which had issued trillions of dollars in mortgages to Americans, were on the verge of collapse. Their toxic assets needed to be evaluated, managed, and the junk had to be disposed of. Who was entrusted with this task? BlackRock. and naturally it profited from these operations. All the more remarkable is the fact that at that time, this company, which officials from the US Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve System of the American Central Bank turned to for help, was only 20 years old. Where did it come from, and why did it become so influential so quickly? The company was founded in 1988 by 7 partners, the main one being Larry Fink, a former employee of the investment bank First Boston. He was only 36 years old, but he was already well known on Wall Street. He was even something of a legend. It was Fink, together with a group of like-minded colleagues at First Boston, who came up with the idea of turning Americans' mortgage obligations into an investment instrument. What does this mean? Let's say John Smith wanted to buy a house in the suburbs with a lawn for barbecues. He didn't have enough money, so he went to a bank or an agency for a mortgage. The bank was happy to give it to him, taking the house itself as collateral. Then these debt obligations were bought up by investment banks. They issued their own bonds secured by these obligations and sold them to investors. This whole complicated scheme allowed a lot of people to get rich at several levels at once. Fink was respected by his colleagues and superiors, until one day he lost $100 million by making an incorrect prediction about interest rate trends. He assumed they would rise, but instead they fell. Fink was forced to leave First Boston for what would later become known as BlackRock. But this negative experience turned out to be a key moment in his life. What lesson did the financier learn from his biggest failure? After founding his own company, Fink promised that he would never again make decisions without calculating and thoroughly assessing all the risks. He understood perfectly well that no matter how talented a person is, they are still human, which means the risk of an unacceptable mistake or an incorrect forecast always remains. What conclusion followed from this? It is necessary to entrust investment risk analysis to computer intelligence, to an algorithm. And it was precisely because of this that BlackRock, which in 1988 was tucked away in the corner of a floor in a New York skyscraper, managed to transform into a financial behemoth controlling a significant portion of the global economy, and to get its own skyscraper. BlackRock's secret weapon had a name. Remember it, Aladdin. BlackRock launched its electronic investment risk assessment system in 1999. Its name, Aladdin, was actually an acronym. In Russian, it can be translated as the investment network of assets, liabilities, debts, and derivatives. So, what is it exactly? This platform uses the vast combined computing power of several thousand distributed computers. You could probably really call it the company's own supercomputer or a computer farm. 2,000 dedicated specialists, from programmers to mathematicians, maintain Aladdin. The algorithm they have created enables round-the-clock, real-time tracking of millions of transactions, analyzing even the slightest changes in the global economy, simulating all possible fluctuations in interest rates, predicting how various assets should behave in any crisis scenario, and of course providing forecasts for every single stock in every portfolio of every BlackRock client in real time. BlackRock's big brother is watching everything. Was Aladdin effective? The easiest way to answer this question is with numbers. In 1999, when the system was launched, BlackRock managed $165 billion. By 2004, it was already $342 billion. 10 years later, this figure reached $4 trillion, and in January of this year, it surpassed $10 trillion. According to analysts' estimates, in another 5 years, BlackRock will be managing $15 trillion. Of course, this is investors' money, but in reality, BlackRock exercises actual control over it here and now. But that's not all. The services of Aladdin, which is not just a brain but an entire nervous system, are sold by BlackRock to third-party companies, even to its direct competitors. In total, more than $20 trillion are currently managed by this electronic system. The supercomputer, performing hundreds of millions of calculations a day, decides where these funds will be invested, what their fate will be, and whether they will bring profit to their owners. Does Aladdin manage BlackRock's assets more effectively than it does the investments of other companies? No one knows. Of course, a single miracle algorithm that predicts the behavior of a company's assets would not be enough to explain BlackRock's phenomenal success. After all, Larry Fink vowed to calculate all risks, including political ones. It was not for nothing that government officials turned to him during times of crisis. Close ties with the current administration in Washington, regardless of its party affiliation, have always been a hallmark of BlackRock. Many of its former employees have gone on to work in government. Even more often, the company itself would hire former officials. These people possess connections and information. They could supplement what Aladdin provided, improve the algorithm itself, and make it even more reliable. There is nothing wrong with former government officials, functionaries from various regulators, or central banks moving to work in the private sector. This is a natural process. A more important question is whether they share insider information with their employer, information they previously had access to as part of their official duties. There is no evidence of this, only speculation. Be that as it may, BlackRock continues to serve as an advisor to government agencies around the world, sometimes even participating in the rescue of entire countries, as was the case in Ireland and Greece in the early 2010s, when BlackRock was involved in a systemic analysis of their banking systems, which were on the verge of collapse. Once again, crisis brought the company and Aladdin new clients. What does BlackRock invest in? It would not be much of an exaggeration to say in everything. BlackRock manages significant investment stakes in nearly all of the world's most influential and major companies. The value of its stake in Apple was estimated at $155 billion, in Microsoft $136 billion, and in Alphabet, Google's parent company, $73 billion. Listing more assets is pointless. It is enough to say that the corporation owns shares in all or almost all of the largest publicly traded American companies. Almost always, BlackRock is among the top 5 largest shareholders of any given business. The same applies to the European economy. BlackRock emphasizes that it does not interfere in the day-to-day operations of its assets and that its involvement is passive. Nevertheless, it is impossible to deny the extent of its potential, even if only theoretical, influence on the global economy. This company, largely unnoticed by the general public, grows bigger and bigger every year. More and more major businesses are getting hooked on Aladdin. The tentacles of BlackRock reach even into places that are, in principle, extremely difficult to access. In August 2021, at the height of the COVID pandemic, an investment fund owned by BlackRock began operating in China. Somehow, Larry Fink managed to persuade the Chinese government to allow his company to be the first foreign firm admitted to this vast and capacious market. What was the result? The first $1 billion was raised rapidly. The Chinese also want to take advantage of the wonders that Aladdin performs. Not even the tense relations between China and the US affected BlackRock's decision to start operating in the PRC. Surely the company's electronic system was at work in this case as well, since Larry Fink never takes risks anymore.